You
I
know
know
what was
why,
cool?
but
I'm just gonna start recording, but we don't have to. We can wait a couple minutes and then we
is
can
this live
proceed.
streamed or is
It
it just
is. It is. That's okay. Is that cool?
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I
I think they
didn't know
always
where it
are.
was going. So it's like
At first, when I started using this, it didn't work. The thing that's weird that I don't really understand is if someone is not on camera, like you aren't, Smirk, it doesn't
Hmm.
show like an empty box. It just doesn't show. So the other night I was doing it with two other people who both had their camera off. So the video is just me, and it's kind of weird because when they're talking, it's just me sitting there.
Oh man, maybe I should turn on my camera and just point it at like a picture of me or something.
Yeah, I don't feel, I didn't say that to make you feel bad or obligated to do it. I just
No,
think that it's funny because I was making sure it was working.
no, yeah.
Because at first I couldn't figure out how to make it stream on this. I like the old platform thing that I use better, but what can you do?
What was the other thing you were using? I was trying to remember.
It was StreamYard,
Oh yeah.
but like about a month or so ish ago, I started getting downloading the recordings and there would be like these weird pops and clicks and I sent them a message and then they said, "Oh, we changed our algorithm. It must be like these settings." So like we troubleshooted like for several days and it didn't fix the problem. And then I tested it on this and there was no problem. So like, well, clearly it's your software. And I made
Yeah.
them like refund some of my like I've now have these recordings that like to 99% of people sounds fine, but I'm like OCD about these like stupid things. So I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna change. Yeah, but yeah, again, don't feel like you have to turn on your. All right, I think James forgot. Although Instagram says he was active 2 minutes ago, which means he's there.
Oh, James.
It's okay. I feel bad. I mean, I feel a little bad because he when that little like video went around on TikTok, the one about this movie being about Wonka being like a socialist owner of a factory. He
Yeah.
sent like several people sent it to me, and he was one of them. He's like, "Oh, if you do this, I want to be on it." And I'm like, "Okay." And now, and actually,
Aw.
I realize now he could be watching this and being like, "You're talking shit." I'm like, "I'm not." I just feel bad, man, James. I just wanted you to have this, but I'm going to cut this out of the podcast, so
Yeah.
it's not weird. No, I think we should just get started. And if he can jump on, then he does, and if not, he can do another. There's plenty of movies in the sea. All right. I guess everyone's good.
Yeah.
I'm just like blathering on. I don't know why. I feel like I had too much caffeine today or something.
I had like 4 cups of coffee. I don't know why. I never have that much, but I kept pouring myself more, and I was like, I have to stop.
That's what happened to me today, and now I feel like I'm like a chattering. Anyway, all right. This week on Left of the Projector, we are talking about the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or by its modern name, Elon Musk and the Tesla Factory. And I have Hungry Rye and Smirk Gently. Thank you both for joining today.
yes, thanks for having us again. It's been a while. I think the last time we both were on was Joker.
Yeah, and that was when was that? Like,
Oh, you were on an episode together. I'm like, oh, you've never been on an episode together, and now I feel stupid.
I was thinking about it. I
ah,
was like, which one is it? And it was Joker.
yeah, that was a fun one. I like that one. That was a good time.
Okay, so scratch all of those things. I'm like, oh, you have, and then I just have forgotten about that movie. Someone I saw posted a review of that on Letterbox and gave it a half a star. I'm like, I don't. It's problematic, but I don't know if it's that bad.
Yeah, I find it I don't know, man. Maybe it's just like I feel like I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I feel bad giving a low rating to anything, even if I really hate it.
That's like apparently a thing on a lot of websites is that people are afraid to give bad reviews. But if you're listening right now, you can give this podcast 5 stars. If you feel bad about giving it less than 5 stars, you can go on Spotify right now and do that.
Yeah.
And I should have also said that, Rye, you also have a new podcast. I know usually at the end I talk about these things, but you want to just tell everyone about your new podcast?
Yes, I'm one of the co-hosts of Literary Liberation Podcast, where me and my other co-host, Kristen, we review a lot of popular book talk reads and series, and we apply our Marxist lens and, review books, see if it's worth all of the hype and connect it to more contemporary issues that we see. It's fun. I like to read. It gives
Yes.
me an outlet, an excuse to continue reading all the garbage I do.
Well, yeah, everyone, you can go follow that on all the same places as all of the podcasts are. But I was prefacing this before we started maybe recording, is that it's sort of this movie is the kind of a child, a children's classic movie that I feel like I had the VHS as a kid. I have fond memories of it. But then on TikTok, a video went around, you know, I think everyone here on this, both of you saw this, about someone referring to this movie. I don't know what, maybe this is pointless. I'll cut this out. But someone was referring to this as Willy Wonka being like a socialist. And I don't really feel like there's any take where that can be applied. In fact, I couldn't believe how I never noticed how much of a critique of capitalism this movie was. And so I don't know. Do you have memories of this movie? Does it like blow your mind? I don't know. I felt like my mind was blown more than some movies.
Yeah, I mean, watching it as a kid, I don't think you pick up on those things because it's just what grabs you is the candy and the whole like fantasy of it. It's like, what would it be like if a kid won the lottery, but it was chocolate? And beyond that, it's just, yeah, it's a fantasy. But watching it again as an adult, you definitely pick up on a lot of things that until I saw that TikTok that you're talking about, I just like didn't give it any thought as to how like you could view it through this lens. But now watching it again, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, people out there. We're ruining your movies we're taking your favorite films and destroying your childhood one movie at a
if, they,
time. I
if
guess
they're listening, they're already on board with that. I think they've probably made their peace.
that's probably true.
And I have a feeling that we all know after this gets posted, clips go out to promote it. People are going to be in your comment section being like, well, it's not that deep. It's just a kid's story. It's not that deep. But this is a very, like, an overt example of, like, class antagonisms. It's a good critique of company towns. And it's a good thought experiment where we can use this to talk about, like, Marxist themes. So even though it's not real, we know that. We're just having fun.
Well, Elon Musk is very real and he is very similarly, kind of constructed. But you're right. There will be
Well, that's the
people.
thing is like with Elon Musk and like the Zuck and Bezos, they're going to probably try to do something like that in the future again, is reenact some sort of like company town. It gives us something to go off of, some sort of frame of reference for the masses that maybe they grew up seeing a piece of media, and we can be like, okay, let's talk about this. We can understand class antagonisms, and then we can build and expand and talk about like imperialism and settler colonialism and the history and just general why capitalism is bad.
Yeah, and I should have also prefaced this too for everyone who probably as a kid may have read this book. It's a Roald Dahl book, which I believe came out in the 50s. Let's see, or 1964. Apologies. So one thing I don't think there's that much reason to bring up too much about the book unless kind of there's some things that are drastically different. But one thing before we get into it, I'm sure we'll talk about the Oompa Loompas. This won't help anyone who is on listening to this podcast because you can't see pictures. You can only hear me and the rest of us. But I'm showing, if you're on the live stream, a picture that was utilized in the original first edition. And they referred basically to the Oompa Loompas as pygmy slaves from Africa. And the picture is quite offensive.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I feel like it was worth mentioning because I think that the movie was very intentional in not really using that source material at all. And for like the right reasons. Like I think this happens a lot when movies have like a leftist bent in some senses. And there's a source material. They're not going to use that right wing. Like Star Trek Troopers is like an example I can think of where it's a right wing book, and then it's a satire. So I just wanted
Yeah, that's an aspect of the book where it veers very heavily from like Roald Dahl to like Rudyard Kipling, like this sort of like aesthetic. And it's not shocking for the time in which it was like written, but they
yeah.
don't there's no way to completely gloss that over in the movie. But thankfully, the imagery they used was not that.
Yeah. I just thought that was mentioning, but I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen this movie, which would be greatly surprised me or know the story, it's basically about an eccentric candy man, Willy Wonka, who owns a factory which no one has gone into for I think they say 20 years. And Charlie Bucket is their main protagonist in this movie. He's a very poor poor kid who goes to school, has a paper route to pay, help his family, and he essentially wins a chance to go inside the factory with four other children, which we'll I'm sure talk about their stories. And I feel like applying that sort of Marxist ideas and just kind of like the idea of capitalism, the whole entire plot is predicated around the fact that the chances of you succeeding and becoming a millionaire is like millions and millions and millions to one. I think that's kind of the premise very heavily in the movie. I don't remember the book. They had the tickets, obviously, but I think it's very much pressed hard here in the movie.
Yeah, but it's interesting because from Charlie's perspective, he's alternately like convinced that he has a shot because he wants it more than anybody else. So there's that like whole idea of like, well, he's a good kid because he's poor and he works hard, so he deserves it more than the other kids. So there's like the false like meritocracy thing there. Very brief disillusionment, and then he's right back into it again, believing that he has a shot and it's going to happen for him because he's just such a like a sweet, hardworking poor child. And there's the honor of being poor and working hard and struggling that stood out to me this time around.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, and so I guess we can like talk through the movie because I feel like there's a bunch of scenes that I found very interesting. The first being, the first thing you kind of start off with is the scene of the candy store, and they're talking about Willy Wonka, and I think he uses the idea that Willy Wonka was like born to do it, like born to be a candy maker, and that he, built his empire presumably. And I kind of think about it because of the prequel movie that's coming out, but it's like this whole like myth of this like this self-made genius who like created these fantastical chocolates. But you like look at the candy bars, it's just a fucking chocolate bar. Like didn't look anything special to me. I don't know.
It's almost like he's his own flavor scientist, next level. And I always found this really confusing is the whole what's the antagonist's name? I can never remember. Slugworth.
Slugworth, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the secrets and whatnot getting leaked. But if he's the best at what he does, why does it matter that like the intellectual property is like coming out? Like, shouldn't you want more competition? Isn't that the whole idea around capitalism is like competition good? You want to make the best product as possible, but how can you do that without having like a more equal playing field? That's what confused me. I never understood that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Well, and then the implication also is that the reason he's like closed the factory too is to prevent anyone from coming in and stealing his secrets. But for 20 years, no one's coming in and out. How is Slugworth getting information, to the outside where people thought he was this other? And the other thing that I was thinking about, is it possible that Slugworth Candy is just like his subsidiary brand? He's making both chocolates because it makes it sound like there's another chocolate company, right?
And they do sell those. Can't like you hear them in the candy store at one point, like offering the Slugworth candy. So it's not like it's a completely made up thing. It's real. But yeah, like there's no actual threat to his business from Slugworth, as we come to find out, and as is evidenced by, how crazy everybody is about Wonka. So, like, yeah, what was the reason?
He bought. I mean, he probably presumably bought all. He owns all of. He owns all of the means of chocolate production across everything. And the other thing I was
Probably.
thinking about too is how, in general, chocolate is often seen as a pretty exploitive product in general, like modern times of where it comes from and all of
Oh
that.
yeah,
So he's peddling on like a problematic product while being this genius, but apparently not good enough to have any competitors.
yeah. A product which is also, I mean, I love candy, but like you can't minimize the effect of high sugar diets, and it just scores of children, dozens of kids, like the first thing they do after they get out of school is go and buy like handfuls upon handfuls of candy. Like he's painted as this hero, this amazing artist who creates this wonderful thing which opens your imagination and just brings joy to children everywhere. But like it's like obviously unhealthy. Like he's essentially like creating a health issue.
And it seems very predatory because of the location of the factory. And there's a lot of impoverished people. So to think, oh, these kids could go in and spend a couple pennies to get this candy, like their one little high, the one happy thing to happen in their day before they have to go home to their material reality of living in like monopoly capitalism in England. It's not in America, right? It's in England in this one.
That's a weird thing. Yeah, no,
I want
sorry,
to
go
talk.
ahead.
Well, yeah, keep going, and I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, it's like the teacher is British. There are random British people sprinkled throughout. Charlie is American. His family's American. His one of his grandmothers sounds maybe German or Eastern European.
The
It's
TV
not really
channel
clear.
is also about. They're saying like here in America we found the first ticket or whatever. It's it's confusing because the city looks like British. Like look at the buildings have that red thatch roof or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
It looks
the
very
people,
British.
they're very British looking people too. Like in the is that weird to say? You know what I mean though? Like
British coded.
You can
they're,
smell the imperialism and
they're
colonialism on
very
them.
British coded. Yeah, you know what I mean. When you know it when you see it. I can't explain it, but you know what it is.
Well, the thing you mentioned about like the kids going and like them being exploited, they later they talk about how many candy bars each kid bought, and they're talking about like I bought 50, 200. That's a lot of money that these people are dropping. And I feel like another thing, I think, because it's very soon after this we discovered that they're going to have this contest. The entire point of the contest, we find out at the end, spoiler, is that he wants to give away his factory to like a good kid, but really he was doing it to sell stuff. It was basically like, oh well, if I do this, people are going to buy millions and millions and millions of chocolate till it's to the point where they're like auctioning off the final case of chocolate in England to some like aristocrat.
The
So it was
Queen.
really, yeah, it was basically just a like a marketing scheme.
Yeah,
The whole movie, right? I
yeah.
mean, um, yeah. So the thing, maybe also I'm curious. They really dig. They don't see any of like the conditions of any of the other people except the five kids. But Charlie's family is like they also name him Charlie Bucket. Like we're gonna just name you, you know, the most it's like it's Charlie means a production. I guess if you're like the rich kid or something, and it's Charlie Bucket, and like they really show like they dig into like the grandparents living in like a single bed. The mother washes clothing. He has to they eat cabbage soup every night. So they really dig into the impoverished nature of it. And given when this movie takes place, I was trying to figure it out. Most people think it was the 1950s because of the technology of like the TVs and some of the other things. So
Mhm.
it's insane that you think about the 1950s, which is a parent time of like pretty, post World War II and kind of things are improving for most Americans. Like they live in abject poverty in this town. I think that comes into what you're talking about, Rye, about like it being like a company town.
Yeah, Wonka as like the Wonka factory being a company town for sure. And what bothered me the most is when they closed down the factory and like this big giant factory, and it could have supplied a lot of jobs, even though it would have been highly exploitative. because of just the nature of capitalism. But then he's so worried about his ideas being stolen that he's just like, you know what, I'm going to disenfranchise all of these proletarians to keep myself safe. So I don't
Yeah,
know where
no,
I'm going with that. That
no,
is one of the things that like bugs me.
no,
Willy Wonka
that's
being
a
like
huge,
this hero and like saving this child from poverty, even though he's. I always wondered when you're going through and you're watching it as a kid, did it not sit funny with you seeing Charlie have the opportunity to win a lifetime supply of chocolate, but they're starving? And I always wonder, like, well, you can't eat chocolate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, what do you do? Do you sell it? Do you? How is that supposed to? I don't know. It's a very weird thing for a kid to win if you're poor.
Yeah.
yeah, it's it's definitely not practical. The thing with him shutting down the factory though, and like all of those jobs disappearing is that you could make the argument because that probably supplied hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. Because I don't know how many Oompa Loompas there are supposed to be. Looks to be a fair few. I mean, he supposedly rescued an entire population from their, like, the way he phrases it, like a shithole country, right? As
From the Schnauzywongers.
yeah, and the whatever they're fucking called,
Hornswogglers.
the hornswogglers and something with a C. Anyway, when he shut down that factory essentially and put all of those people out of work, he probably created the very poverty that Charlie and his family are now experiencing. Because it's more than likely that at least a few of the people, if not like both of his sets of grandparents, probably were working in the factory or in businesses that were related to the factory. Because if he's not hiring people from the town, he's probably also not sourcing much from the town. So he probably created like a whole like mini recession within like that one place just by firing all those people at once.
Yeah,
And
because it would affect like the
ultimately,
laws of like supply and demand, because there wouldn't be a demand because no one would be able to afford it of all the
exactly.
things. They all been laid off.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plot holes.
Well, you were saying that in the newer version with Johnny Depp, the grandfather apparently had worked in the factory. Like that actually
Yeah.
would have been a good. It would have been a good piece to have included because that actually makes it worse because that proves your exact point that they laid off the town. They now are in poverty because of this, and there's
Yeah.
no social safety net. Like it's even worse because there's no health care, there's no housing. Like their house is in complete disrepair. They show the house. I mean, it looks like a not a very nice place to live. And so
Yeah.
Willy Wonka is revered, but he's just an asshole.
You know what it reminds me of? And I got into this is if I can go off on a like very brief tangent. You're familiar with Hershey, obviously. Everybody is.
Yes, Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Hershey, fucking Pennsylvania. They worship that dude. They're like, oh my God, Milton Hershey. What a great guy. Such a philanthropist. He's donated all this money. He took such good care of the town and he started this like school for boys and all this stuff. And it's like he wouldn't have had to do so much philanthropy. He would not have had to donate so much money if he hadn't gotten so much of that money from exploiting the labor of people he wasn't paying enough. He wouldn't have so much left over to give away if he was paying people what their
Right. And then if
labor
it
was
was
worth.
so good, then like why would they be unionizing? Like why would the CIO go in there and try to unionize? And then when they started unionizing, like the company would help hire like anti like strikers to help break it up. And then
Exactly.
switch, oh, we're gonna fire them because we're moving to seasonal work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. I've been
we
sitting
were
here staring
discuss.
at my notes.
It's one of my
I
huge fucking things. Sorry, go ahead.
no, you were you were we were well, you didn't share what you were going to say, but you were talking about the Hershey before you came on. So, like, it's a perfect, almost one to one kind of comparison.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be chocolate. You can just name your factory. You can name your town. It could be auto parts. It could be whatever. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. Yeah, and the thing that I also noted that I never noticed this before, maybe as an adult, to like also watching it critically is the whole like Wonka thing when they're like they have it on TV. I think also this isn't in the book. Is that right? Like the whole thing about all the TV coverage, I feel like is not in the book.
Mm-mm.
It makes more sense given this. It felt very like Beatlemania-y. That was like the vibe I got. I don't know, like, people like losing their mind over like Willy Wonka chocolate bars. But it's only because of the tickets, which also I wonder, is it possible that his like sales were down and that's why he did this? People are like, you don't even make good candy anymore. Where's the everlasting gobstopper? And so he has this little contest to sell a bunch of chocolate. Who
You would
knows?
think that there would be like an Oompa Loompa that was his like right hand man that he would want to like turn the company over. He's like, oh, I don't have any family. I don't have any kids. Why wouldn't you just do that?
Yeah, or just hand the factory over entirely to your workers, right?
This
Why
this
not? Why not just deed it to them?
I just saw this clip pop up on Instagram from The Simpsons where Mr. Burns is trying to find an heir for his factory, and like
Oh yeah,
and Miss Smithers is in the room. He's like, oh, I can't find anyone to give my factory to. And Smithers is like, oh, what about me? He's like, oh, of course no. Like you're gonna be buried alive with me when I die. Which
and
is
then it shows the little figurine, and he's like scratching at the inside of the coffin.
yeah, but like it's the same kind of thing. It's like he could do right by all the Oompa Loompas, give them the collective ownership of their own means of production, open it back up to the town because presumably they're not as exploitive as their 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 father or
Benefactor.
whatever. It's like super creepy. And actually, I want to talk about like the few like the each of the different people who win to go in. I think is all of them are like extremely funny and things I never noticed. So the first one is like the German kid, and you were talking about Smirk about like the idea that like chocolate is very unhealthy to eat in a whole bunch. Like he like embodied that. He was like saying that eating was his hobby. He eats the microphone when they're giving him the interview. Like it's
Yeah,
very like as a kid you're like, oh haha, it doesn't
But it's very fat phobic.
it
very
Like
it's
is.
very
reflecting
offensive.
back
Yeah,
on it, I'm like, oh my god. Yeah, and it's in the book too. Like they constantly are dunking on Augustus, and on it, it's not his fault. He's a kid. The
Yeah.
parents. This is like a reoccurring theme amongst all the kids. Is they're all villainized, and you're supposed to hate the kids, but nobody's paying attention to like the parents and how they're raising the children.
yeah. The parents suck, and I kind of wonder too, like what the time period in which the book was written, how much of that has to do with why it was a German family, and just
Hmm.
there has to be something there, like given the recent events in Germany at the time, and the general attitude towards Germany, even when the movie came out.
Are you saying
So
are you saying they're trying to rehabilitate German culture in some sense?
no, exactly the opposite. I think I
Oh,
think it
oh, oh, like in the
was,
book,
yeah.
but in the book maybe they were.
Um,
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I don't know
Okay.
what Roald Dahl's being that he's kind of a racist doesn't necessarily mean he likes Nazis.
I know he was anti-Semitic. Like there's a lot of
Yes,
anti-Semitic themes in the rest of his book, so I don't.
that's true. I guess it's not really much of a stretch at that point. But and the other thing, and so the thing that I wrote, what was it? And then I think it was right after that where Charlie and his grandfather, he's saying like I have the same chance as anybody. I can do this, and it was like this whole. I wrote like this under capitalism, like you don't have the same chance as everyone. Like Augustus family owned like the town's butcher factory or something. One of
Yeah.
them owns a car dealership, and the one owns a button factory. Like so, they all like own the means of production and have rich kids and rich families. Charlie does not have the same chance as any of these kids. It's
Yeah. And it's pure luck that he ends up getting the chocolate bar because he finds a quarter or something in the gutter. That's how he ends up getting the winning one.
I have a theory about him winning. About it. It's a stretch, but but
I'm looking forward to hearing that.
and then I don't know. Did one of you tell me that Roald Dahl hated TV, or maybe I read this? So apparently that's why he made the second or one of the kids later, what's his name? Not
Like
Violet.
TV.
Yeah, like that was apparently like to make fun of his hatred of the television.
It would make sense because in the book he just goes like the Oompa Loompa song talking about Mike TV and why they wanted to shrink him. They're like, you guys are poisoning your child's minds by having them sit in front of TV. And think about how kids were raised back in the day. They didn't have TVs. They read books. They should be reading. Like the whole Oompa Loompa song is about, which is great. Like reading is awesome. But not to that extent, like where you shrink another human being as a means of like punishing him and the parents.
Yeah, it's you don't need to punish, like, if the kids, like the parents should be punished, like you're saying. It's like the parents are the, and then so Veruca is the second one who like, I feel like you are meant to really hate her more than any of the children, but you also have to again think about it. You know, her dad says he bought 760,000 chocolate bars. And I actually posted this clip on TikTok, which is like very on the nose, which is also what made me think like this movie is very obvious. The people are all ripping open the chocolate bars and she runs up with the golden ticket and she's like, look, I got it. I found it. And it's like the very essence of just other people doing your labor and then being like, I did this.
Right.
Yes, exactly. It's like, oh, you're doing like your surplus labor value being extracted. And like it should be hers for opening that up, but because she didn't make the initial investment in capital.
Yes, it wasn't her factory, so.
Yeah.
Which is that like his, like he's obviously very rich. He's bought a million chocolate bars. And okay, here's the other thing. Did you notice he said that he announces to the group of the workers that there would be a £1 bonus in their paycheck? He would give them £1 for finding the golden ticket, which he spent probably $1 million to obtain. A fucking pound.
Yeah.
You should give that kid that woman the lifetime supply of chocolate, or to all the people. Should have Willy Wonka, if he was if this was like Soviet Russia, he would have killed all the parents too. They all deserve to go to like the chocolate gulag and like can labor in the factory instead of
the chocolate gulag instead of the children going one by one.
Yeah, I mean, like the parents are. I mean, we'll obviously talk about the thing there. We don't have to. I mean, I feel like I'm spending too much time on all the kids. Violet is also like very strange. They also mentioned that the father's like a politician and a car dealer. Like they try to like make him just seem like the sleaziest piece of shit like in the movie.
Yeah.
He's like the creep. He's very creepy. He's like handing people his business card.
What I thought was weird. A couple things I thought were weird was that like the characteristics of the kids, like the exact things that make them so reprehensible and that we're supposed to really hate about them, is that Augustus is gluttonous and he eats too much chocolate, and we're supposed to hate him for that, which again, fat phobic and gross. And also he's a kid. Kids like candy. Mike TV watches too much TV, and also in the movie they slip in the whole like TV violence thing. Like he's watching like, I don't know, something with guns in it, probably something with cowboys. And he's talking about how he wants a gun and his dad's like, not till you're 12, son, or whatever.
12.
12 or a Colt 45. That's what it was. And he's like, I want a real one. Just wait. And he says something while he's watching TV and they're there for the interview after he finds the ticket. They're like, he's like, oh, and he like makes a little, like he has a fake gun in his hand and he shoots at the TV and he's like, killed him. He's like, oh, you like that, huh? And he's like, yeah, that's what life's all about. Just wait till I get a real one, which is deeply unsettling.
The reporter says, you like killing?
He's like, oh, you like that? Like, and yeah, I guess.
Really
I guess that's what he's. Yeah, it's deeply unsettling. And then with Violet, her thing is that she's obnoxious, but she's also just like highly competitive. And then with Veruca, she's very spoiled. And sorry, do you hear my cats like trying to like murder each other in the background? This is insane.
My dog is like ripping her. Can you hear that? I'll edit that out. Anyway.
We have some special guest stars tonight. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like, I don't know if there's anything to why like these traits were assigned as such, but like,
I have a theory. Here's another theory I have. Is this supposed to be like the 7 deadly sins or like some of them?
That's what I
Yeah,
was wondering, but I couldn't connect them all because there's only like the 5 kids, unless Willy. I'm like, I don't know, the Oompa Loompas.
So, so just for anyone who doesn't know them, so there's lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. And so, gluttony would obviously be Augustus, I think. Um, I mean, maybe there isn't a one to one on all of them. Greed, it's like almost all of them are greedy. I mean, it feels like they all have this nature of greed. Um,
yeah. But in Charlie's case, though, it's supposed to be good, though, because to an extent, like it's like his is the kind that's allowed for some reason
yeah,
because yeah, because he works because he's a poor kid that has to work.
but none of them really embody like the idea of sloth of just being, you know, I don't feel like that one fits in really at all. Wrath, I mean, you could say I don't know if that one even fits. Yeah, I mean there isn't really one. Well, I mean maybe they're like, oh, maybe we can have 7 tickets. No, we'll just go with 5. So they didn't want to have it. Like pride, I guess you could say Charlie, embodies that. He's kind of, but I think that one's actually the worst one. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page and said it's the original and worst of the sins, and most demonic is pride, the opposite of humility. So I don't know.
I would describe that one to Wonka then, I would think. You can make the argument that pride would be his because he's too proud to give his factory to the workers who make it possible or to, you know, share the wealth of his inventions or anything with the town who could use those jobs.
Yeah.
The whole like shutting it down and everything, only wanting to find the perfect child because if it's going to be his legacy and his business that he's giving away, it has to be the perfect, hardworking, sweet child.
Does the book have the false winner like from what is it from? Paraguay?
Paraguay.
Paraguay? Is that happen in the book where they have like a false winner?
Yeah, there's 2 false like forged tickets, but they don't. It's not as big of a deal. It's not like, oh, it leads up into like Charlie chilling out and then thinking there's an opportunity for him to have it, like leading there to be chocolate on the shelves for him.
Yeah, it felt very random that they choose like Paraguay, but they say it's like the owner of a casino and millionaire. It also felt very intentional that they chose like South America given the time frame, but I don't know. That's just me reaching
Yeah.
like, oh, like they're gonna choose this casino and millionaire who's probably like propped up by like the CIA or something. I don't know. But yeah, so they
Also worth.
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say also worth noting. There's not like a single non-white person on screen like the entire time, unless you
No,
count
the Oompa
that
Loompas.
one scene. And yeah, it's just I don't want to.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't have. They couldn't have had someone from Africa winning because that wouldn't have been right. Uh,
Maybe that like plays into like Roald Dahl's like politics of like white supremacy
Yeah.
and him extracting like his Oompa Loompas from Africa. So he's just like, oh, whoever is going to inherit this company is going to be white, which in accordance with like capitalist ideology is more often going to be like a white man that's going to be the CEO of a company
Yeah.
than like the proletarian, which is going to be like the majority of the population and also be disproportionately uh what am I thinking? The majority, like the demographic, sorry,
right.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
that is going to be more diverse.
Yes.
That's where we're going with it, I think. I don't know. This is a ramble, but we got there.
So here's where I'm going to give you my theory about. So this is when Charlie wins. Like you said, he found the coin in the gutter. He goes into the chocolate store. He's going to buy something else, or he buys something else first and like chomps it down, and then he buys the second one, which also is
Which he does this for his grandfather, but doesn't give it to him.
right. Which also the whole thing like about him like smoking tobacco. We didn't even like mention that. I feel like that was like a weird little nod, but I feel like it was meant didn't really mean much. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So my theory is, do you remember at the beginning of the movie when he goes in front of the factory and he's like looking in and there's that kind of that crazy guy selling like his wares on a cart, like knives and something. My
Yeah.
theory, this is a big stretch. My theory is that that guy worked with like Slugworth. Slugworth is kind of surveying the area. They have the first four winners are all kind of like rich kind of assholes. So I think he plants the ticket candy bar because they don't have very many left at this point because they've sold out all over. It's like one case he finally gets in, and the candy guy puts it up right at the top and he pulls it off the very front.
Mm.
Like, is it that they maybe planned seeing that this kid, poor, good kid, maybe we can give it to this factory to him. And so it was rigged for him in some way. But I guess the kind of, I don't know, stupid.
I think that plays into it plays into the whole sort of like mystical and magical character that Wonka wants to make for himself. Like the whole idea that he's this out of this world brilliant candy guy, and right along with the song in the beginning, the Candyman song, that paints him as this like larger than life figure who's meant to do this. It wouldn't be a far cry to say that he plans for Charlie to win, like he's chosen him and constructed this plot in order to make sure that he got the candy. It's probably not much.
I mean, again,
I can respect that a lot more than the whole like divine intervention, like the one lucky child. They were just meant to have it. Of like a select group of 5 kids that were just like randomly selected to win this lottery.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also very clear the comparison of the 4 other children and Charlie. Like, it's very obvious. Like, throughout the whole thing, the parents are like complaining about all of the things happening, and Charlie is sitting with his grandfather being like, I'm just happy to be here. Like, they're not complaining. They're just like, this is like the greatest day of our lives when you're complaining about this magical tour because you just want something more. They all kind of embody that greedy nature. But getting to the tour, the other thing too is when they first get in, they have to sign like the contract. And I wrote down like that it was kind of like foreshadowing where they're kind of, the grandfather says like, oh, you have nothing to lose by signing the contract. Again, like there's nothing to lose for them. And, presumably they, maybe I lost where I was going.
Well, Wonka sues them for money, and they're like, I ain't got none. What are you to sue me for? You want some cabbage soup? You want my mom to wash your socks? Like, for real? Like, what do they have to? They literally don't have anything to lose.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it's very much like a fuck it mentality.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And he, I think is this where they, yeah, like the whole thing, like at the beginning, the thing I didn't mention earlier is that when they look in the factory, it gave me this vibe of like Disneyland, like this mythical, behind the gates, like the smokestack castle. And it made me think like all the little like tricks that like Willy Wonka has. It's like none of this has anything to do with like making candy. He's just like a weirdo who is like fucking with these kids and parents inside of his factory.
I think it's kind of because what he sells is escapism, sort of like what you were talking about right before with these kids who presumably most of them aren't quite as poor as Charlie because they can go and get candy every day after school, or at least like once or twice a week, but they're all struggling in some way or another, and all they have to look forward to is this one treat. And the song he sings about imagination and just you can what does he say?
I had the song.
You can be free if you truly wish to be. Like, just imagine, it's all there for you. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and imagine a better existence. Here you are.
It's almost like he's trying to test them to see if they can overcome their own personal demons, their vices, and that's why they go through the route in the factory that they do. Because I generally do think that if one of them may have been able to figure it out, maybe Augustus didn't go and gobble up all of the chocolate in the river, like maybe he would have had just as equal of an opportunity as Charlie to inherit the factory. But Charlie's was ultimately like Slugworth, like selling it so that his family could have money, which is fucked. Like that was his test.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the line in the song also, he says, "You want to change the world, there's nothing to it," which is also kind of, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of
Bullshit.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, that's right. But it's also, yeah, it's also, it almost feels like it says, "Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be." Like all of it feels very much. I still can't think of the word I'm thinking of.
it's
Idealistic,
bootstrappy. It's very
idealistic.
yeah, it's like bootstrappy, like idealistic view of their actual situation. It's
Like,
certainly
you
in
know
Project.
that Wonka isn't paying for the permits. He's not doing anything. There's no like workers' rights like no
Oompa
like
Loompa Union.
OSHA is not going
Yeah,
through there. He's got his money in like the government because there's just no way that any of that would be allowed to happen, and like the pollution that would be coming out of those like silos into like the city.
Yeah, they show a lot of smoke coming out of the silo in that one moment. I'm like, oh, is that like who? What is he burning in there?
dissident Oompa Loompas, maybe.
That's actually was I was gonna make that joke, but it felt too dark. But thank you. That was
Kind of.
well. So and then I think that also you were saying like in the book. I think I also was like I didn't read it through, but like are the songs longer? Or are they the same? Do you know?
They're about like they seem really long in the movie, but most of them were pretty spot on because some of them are changed. Like there isn't the golden goose with
Yeah.
Baruka, and then I'm trying to think if there was the rest of them are I think on
But
point
what I thought
with what was
about the
happening.
songs were so cool is well the note that I wrote for the first one was like just don't be greedy. Like that was really like each one of them has a very pointed message, and some of them do allude to the parents being like negligent parents. So like it's very clear as a kid I never noticed that. You know, you're just like, oh, like they're dancing around and making saying funny songs. It's not. I feel like those songs were meant for the parents that were watching the movie.
Mhm.
It like it's going back. I mean, I never said this before, but a lot of movies now, like animated movies, are like kids movies that are made kind of for adults. I feel like this movie is like a kids movie targeted maybe towards more adults. I don't know if you think that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the humor I don't think is necessarily geared towards children. Like a lot of the jokes towards the beginning. And it's funny. I was just thinking, like Charlie doesn't get an Oompa Loompa song because he doesn't like fuck up and well, he does break a rule, but he doesn't really experience any consequences because of it. The only song he gets is the one at the beginning that his mom sings when he's like sad and talking about how he's he's not going to win and it doesn't matter. It's like the only song he gets is one of a parent who is raising a kid in poverty and is trying to like keep some sort of hope alive with no like real indication of like how things are going to get better, just always assuring him that like just cheer up, it's going to be okay, things are going to turn around at some point,
The invisible hand of the
which is just
market
yeah,
will
which is
help.
fucking depressing and hits a little bit harder now as an adult, like with a child. Like I don't know, like it feels like trying to talk to your kid and framing things like that. You want to give them hope, but doesn't that feel like in her case, wouldn't that feel like a lie? It's just how is she so optimistic? It's just
Yeah.
Maybe she's just come to terms with her material reality.
yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
also thought
But
it
she,
was interesting, like the how do I want to frame this? Like the way the film depicts living more like intergenerational like families together
Mhm.
and it being like a negative connotation associated with that, but in reality that's probably how we ought to be living, is having more like communal like homes where we are taking care of one another and not so isolated in the ways that like American capitalism has conditioned us to believe that we need to just go out and be on our own.
Yeah,
individualism, like shared resources, will be a lot more useful.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
we all
economic.
just take care of our own and
Yeah,
like our neighborhood and our communities, and just I don't know that part.
I mean,
Now watching it back as an adult
in other
is a
countries,
little
that is a common thing, though. Like you look in
Yeah.
other places other than America, it's not so uncommon to live in a multi-generational home. But yeah,
Yeah, and they'll like it's interesting. In some places, I forget exactly where, so I don't want to say because I'll probably get it wrong. But they'll have these like it'll be like generational like housing, and they'll leave like space on the tops of their homes with like built-in like piping basically so that you can easily add on another addition because the expectation is that, as the family progresses and grows older and more family members come in, you just add on to what you have. You don't expect people to just like pack their bags and figure out their lives at like 18 or 20 or 25. It's just not the expectation.
Like they don't like that whole phrase, it takes a village to raise children. Like I imagine like Charlie had a lot more of a well-rounded like education and understanding of the world because of his grandparents being able to live there and teach him things about history.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think any of the other families had going for them.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Veruga's
I
like,
think it was a good thing.
yeah, Veruga's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to go to school if I don't win this golden ticket. Like, education is not necessary, really, you know, for them because it's not of interest to them. It's more like a pet project or a hobby or something. Whereas, like Charlie's, the only time you really hear anything, the grandfather is telling him the history of the Wonka factory because that's relevant
Mhm.
to the thing. But I could easily see him teaching him, like coming home, being like, "Oh, what was World War II like? Did you kill any Nazis, Grandpa?" I guess he fought in World War. Well, he was too old. He would have fought in World War One, I guess, right?
Because he's like 96 or something.
In the book, he's 96.
He's very old.
Wow, 96. Oh my God.
It makes a lot
Well,
more sense when he's like jumping out of bed why it's a big deal.
Okay.
My
yeah.
grandma's 94 and I take care of him. The idea of him like shooting out of bed, I'd be shitting bricks too. Like, bro, you're
Yeah.
gonna break your hip.
Well, she says
Let's calm down.
they've been bedridden for 20 years. 20 years they've been
He
bedridden.
was
Initially, like,
64 in this.
yeah, like initially, I think when I watched it, and I think there's like a whole subreddit called like like Grandpa Joe hate or something. It's like everybody's like, "Wow, what a dick," Like, initially, watched it, and I remember like thinking or like hearing that it's really selfish of him to like smoke tobacco when his family is so poor. But that in itself is like, dude is bedridden for 20 years. They live in abject poverty. They eat cabbage water every night. If he wants to smoke, let him fucking smoke. Like,
Give him
I
a
don't care.
vice.
Yeah, like let him have something. He's got nothing else going on.
That's what I was thinking earlier. Is the note that I wrote is like at one point, like on one side of the coin, it's like you are struggling to get by, but it's this is like one thing that gives him joy. Like let him
Yeah, and
have
it's
it.
not going to make the difference between them living in a one room home and not.
Yeah, the conservative take of this would be like, when they say like, "Oh, how dare these poor people have like a nice TV?" Like how
Yeah.
dare like, "Oh, how dare Grandpa Joe have a yeah."
Well, if you didn't get your Starbucks every day, then maybe you'd be able to afford a new house.
Yeah, the avocado toast theory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our house is like $10,000, like they were in
Yeah.
1962 when this movie, whatever, or 70. No, not that exact, but yeah. And so and then like going through some of this, like a lot of the scenes in the factory is all like I just kept writing down like average eccentric billionaire has the crazy boat that like like I don't know gives them LSD and shoots weird images on the images in that was like the one scene as a kid that scared me. Like the boat
Yeah.
scene, it always creeped me out. Like the bugs and
It's a fever dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Deeply unsettling. I don't know if this is true, but I remember hearing that like they didn't tell the actors besides Gene Wilder like what was going to happen when they were shooting that. They just kind of put him on the boat and they were like, "All right, be your most wild Gene Wilder and do this and we're going to flash the lights and freak everybody out."
it actually would make it for a good reaction because it feels very authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they also the other thing too that I want to mention. So the second time is when Violet eats the gum and she turns into a blueberry, and then when they're leaving the room, he says, "Shall we roll on?" Which I think is like hysterical. I was laughing, but every time after the first one, if you ever just looked at Wonka, he's like sitting there with like this, you know, sour face, being like, "Come," he knows. It's almost like he knew and set them up for these things that they were going to do. It's like he brought the person who likes, it's like he brought Smog into a room filled with gold, and it's like obviously you're going to try and take all the gold. So it felt very intentional that he brought her into a place where she likes gum, and so she's of course going to chew the gum.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So that's why I think he was killing, like he's punishing them in some way, as opposed
yeah.
to he's just a
Also,
sick
how he
freak.
like nonchalantly acknowledges the fact that he was testing the gum on several Oompa Loompas. He's like, same result every time. Like, what about the rest of them? Like, you're trying this out on your workers,
Yeah,
and all they're
that's
getting
the
paid is
smoke.
cocoa beans.
Yeah.
That's the smoke coming out of the smokestack when they're doing the
Yeah.
juicing of the other Oompa Loompas.
I'm saying, man, there's some dark stuff happening beyond the weird boat ride.
No, but you're right though. He's clearly all this is like experimental stuff that he's being like, "Hey kid, try this gum," which he doesn't explicitly tell her to, but she's obviously a little kid. You're gonna put gum there. She's gonna eat it.
I think the ultimate test for all of them is supposed to be the gobstopper thing. But I fully believe that he never had any intention to release that to the public. I don't think he was ever going to put that out,
I don't even.
because why would he?
That would
It's
make him
not
bankrupt.
profitable.
Yeah, not profitable at all. Like, oh, this way, a poor kid only has like a penny
That's like if
and have this kind of forever.
if Elon Musk could create like the Star Trek replicator, they would never give it out to people because then you wouldn't need him.
Or a Tesla that lasts and isn't recalled.
Or blows up while you're driving it. Yeah, I mean, and then the second song I noted was kind of weird. It's like telling the kid to have good manners and like chew like a cow because she's always chewing gum. Like that's kind of like
Like, who cares? Yeah, like,
yeah, it's like
okay.
you're a 10-year-old kid and you like chew gum a lot. I don't know. It's not. It didn't
Yeah.
feel very interesting. And then like that's the thing where they take the fizzy drink and Charlie like takes a sip, and again it doesn't end up mattering at the end. And then the third song I think is the third song
Should be Veruca.
Veruca. You're right. The golden
Yeah.
goose, like her like wanting it, and then it's like blame. That was the one where they say blaming the parents, right? You said that wasn't in the book. That song.
No, because like in the book, it's the one that happens with the Johnny Depp movie where there's a bunch of squirrels and they crack
Mm.
open walnuts to get the nut out whole. And then they pin her down on the ground and they tap her head and she's a bad nut. So they chuck her in. And then they throw the dad. Like the dad goes to look and he's just like, oh, go pluck her out.
That's a little more
Yeah.
dark.
And he falls in.
Yeah.
In this case, she's just diving in because she wants a shiny golden egg.
Well, she falls in. She stands on the scale that measures whether it's a good egg or a bad egg, and it deems her a bad egg.
Right, which I think is also telling because then it's like, oh, it's not the kid who's the bad egg, it's the parents. You should blame the parents for the parenting, not her for being like a spoiled kid.
Well, this is very much where it's like the story is a product of its time too, because I mean, not to say that it's much different now, but the onus is and always should be on the parents to correct the behavior and to raise kids who don't throw a shit fit over not getting an egg that nobody said they could have. But like,
Yeah.
that's not acknowledged. She's the one who ends up going down the garbage chute.
The whole like description of like which chute it's gonna go down, like which one is gonna burn them that day is also very funny. Obviously he knows which one is which.
Yeah.
And so
He's just fucking with them. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like,
Because
oh
this is
no, don't
standard
do
for
that.
him.
Stop. He like says it in such a
Yeah.
funny tone. And then the fourth one is the one you were talking about, Rod, before, which is you should read more instead of watching TV. Which again, it's like, yeah, okay, you should read more, but the kid likes TV. Maybe like don't let this kid like have a gun at age 12.
Yeah, they're like talking poorly about parents, and he essentially insinuates that parents are lazy because they sit their kids in front of the TV instead of like entertaining them or leaving them to their own devices to like find a book and use their imagination. And it's just so out of touch with what it's like to raise children. And I know not everyone goes the whole iPad baby route, but sometimes you just for your own sanity just need like 10 minutes
Yeah.
You got to cook
to
dinner.
yourself. Just like, please focus on this.
And honestly, it's taken the place of the village that we're supposed to have, you know, because if we had the village that it takes to raise a child, if that was more commonplace, then it wouldn't be so necessary for so many of us to just, in order to have that 10 minutes, give them
Exactly.
a
One or
tablet.
two people are not intended to raise children by themselves. Like, you need
Yeah,
help. You need the extra hands.
yeah,
Yeah. Presumably, if you have a whole, yeah, I mean, not literally a village, but you have multi-generational homes, like the grandparents can watch them while you're cooking dinner, or the grandmother is making dinner. And yeah, it's you know, having kids, like there's sometimes you just, what else are you going to, you know, what else can you do? Like, yeah, you can have, yeah, sometimes they'll want to read a book, but sometimes they don't want to. Sometimes they want to
yeah.
play Minecraft or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and as adults, you know, who are we're allowed to make our own decisions. We have autonomy, which kids more often than not don't. We aren't told by someone, hey, no, sorry, you already watched enough TV today, so now you have to read a book. What if that's all you want to do right then? What if you're exhausted because, you know, I mean, in the now, not to like get into the whole thing on TikTok with like teachers and kids and everything right now, but like in the now, we're dealing with kids who, for the past 3 years, have had their worlds fucking rocked and were cut off from everybody for like a year. It stunted their social development and made school way harder because parents who were already stretched thin were put in charge of their education essentially. And it's not realistic to
Yeah.
expect, you know, kids to cope as well as people seem to expect them to do now. And even then, it's like this is still a post-war situation. Like this is still a really, really messed up, weird world that like Charlie and all these other kids are living in. It has been for a long time. So yeah, maybe they want to watch TV a little bit. You know, in Mike's case, obviously the parents weren't like really taking the initiative to like help him develop other ways of coping instead of just completely escaping all the time. But like it's just an exaggeration of the way people
Okay, but
tend to
like,
view screens.
hear me out. What if Mike TV's like special interest was cowboys? Like, what if Mike TV is
Yeah,
autistic? What if
yeah,
that's what it was the whole time? Just like the way he acts and his like mannerisms, he could be on the spectrum. I could be reaching here, but like I get him. I
yeah,
get Mike TV.
yeah. This is a reach safe space. I think you're allowed to reach here.
Yeah.
I was thinking earlier. I was like, you know, it's funny that the traits they give to the girls that are supposed to be really like gross and that we hate them for it is being spoiled, which is always something that they assign to girls in stories. It seems like, and then the other one is just like super ambitious and competitive, which is like, ew, you're a girl. You're not supposed to be like that.
Yeah. You're not supposed to go for Guinness Book of World Records of chewing gum,
Yeah.
which is also like, that would actually probably hurt your teeth.
Also, just it would taste gross after a while. I think that'd be nasty.
Yeah. And so I guess all the kids now have been carried away. And at this point, the thing that's also strange is, so at the very end of the tour, they kind of like tell Charlie and his grandfather, like, you have to leave. Like, was he expecting him, like, at them at that exact moment to hand over, like, you know, the piece of the gobstopper as sort of to end it? But instead, he sort of, you know, goes off on his own way to like pay his bills in this like weird, everything is cut in half room. And I think the grandfather calls like billionaires being crooks, which I thought was
Mhm.
like pretty base. I'm like, oh yeah, you're just calling this dude a crook for like getting this kid's hope up and then like destroying them. And the kid is devastated. He's crushed, and he's like, I guess I'm just gonna go home back to whatever it is. I guess all this was a lie. And then like at the last moment, he has that change of heart because they think they're gonna get money from. So I don't think that Charlie. What if Charlie leaves the everlasting gobstopper because he like looks up to Willy Wonka as this genius and doesn't want them to find out the secret of this gobstopper. He's not doing it to win. He's doing it because he actually looks up. He's he's bootlicking Willy Wonka.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's he feels a little bit ashamed for stealing the fizzy lifting drinks and for disappointing him. Um, he's upset that Grandpa Joe yells at him.
Yeah.
because he doesn't, he thinks
Yes,
thinks Wonka's some kind of hero. And
I am right now. Can you please go?
We're probably
I've been waiting for my turn for that. I like keep looking at the door because he fell asleep literally 2 minutes before I
He
came out here.
told
I'm
him
like,
that I was gonna be doing something early. He's like, I keep hearing him. Ray.
but yeah, no, I don't think he does it to win. I think he does it, and that's very much like a story, like a character thing with Charlie. Like he's supposed to be very pure of heart. So he just,
Right.
out of the goodness of his heart, he's just like, here, take this. I don't deserve it because I disappointed you.
Yeah, and Wonka was almost, I felt like he seemed to like have an expectation that he was going to. He's like, I knew you would do it. I knew you had it in you. That was where I felt like he was set up to come on this trip because it's, he didn't know him, like as a person, even on the tour. Like they're not chatting. He's being like this weird eccentric dude showing them all these weird inventions. They're not like chit chatting. He just knows that he's not wealthy and that he was brought there as like a pure heart, a pure soul, and he was hoping he would, I don't know, prove it.
He's like the kid that's not supposed to be there.
Right.
Like compared to the rest. Like he's just an anomaly.
Yeah, and okay, so when Charlie gets the ticket, does Slugworth come and talk to him
He
directly like
does.
he does with the other
He
kids?
does. He's running home and he accosts him in like a tunnel,
Yeah.
which is all like
So
he was following him around.
yeah, and with the other kids, it's like they were on TV, so everybody knew.
Well,
But
but no, though. Well, I guess if you found the ticket, then they would come to your house later and then Slugworth could show up.
that's when he shows up, and all the other kids in cases, like
But why
when
was
they're
he,
on
no,
TV.
but wait, why was he inside of the factory with Veruga Salt?
Because he wasn't like really Slugworth. It was just a prank, bro.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Like that's essentially what Gene Wilder does to him.
Well, but
So
no,
in the
but
movie,
no, but I
like
guess
it's just like
why
a
is
test.
he in there? Like he knew that she was gonna get the ticket, I guess, right?
Yeah. So if he planned it for Charlie, he planned it for all the kids, and that's why.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like she wins the ticket from the worker, and she's climbing up the staircase, and Slugworth just kind of like pops out of nowhere in the middle of the factory floor and whispers in her ear,
Yeah.
to get the gobstopper. So
So Willy
he was,
Wonka like preemptively planned
yes,
abusing children.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
I
god!
didn't think about it until just now. I kind of putting it together because when you ask, oh, how did Charlie get noted, and it was when he's running home. How else could he have found him that quickly? Well,
Yeah.
I guess he lives near the factory, but how the hell would he know he had the ticket?
Right.
He planned every kid to be on this trip.
Yeah. They were all specially selected. Kind of like Saw in a way, right?
With a little less organ displacement.
Yeah, it's like Saw, but for kids, so it's fun. Yeah,
Maybe
and
he
that's how
harvests their
the
organs
tour.
afterwards.
I mean, they said they were going to have to squeeze what's her face, and who knows? Who
And
knows?
they were gonna pull the little TV kid out of like with a taffy machine. I don't
Yeah,
think that's gonna work.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think the whole thing, and it's he didn't need to do this. He could have just sent out one ticket if he wanted Charlie. If he specifically selected him, he could have just sent out the one ticket, made sure Charlie got it, which clearly he's capable of doing. But instead, he creates this whole weird, like, elimination style game for these other kids that he deemed just terrible enough to be interesting. This is like entertainment for him because he hasn't seen another person besides the Slugworth guy in like 20 years, and then the Oompa Loompas, who he doesn't see as people.
Well, he might
It's
not
like
even
more
see.
so like kids Squid Game.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't think he sees Slugworth. I think he just calls him on the phone because they didn't have like FaceTime. Like the gate's locked, right? He can't go inside.
Is Slugworth there at the end? And he's like,
Is.
oh,
Yeah.
He pops out of the little half room. So he's waiting.
He's like,
yeah. He's just gonna sit there the whole time.
He's like where's Waldo? Like you're in like a town and like Slugworth is like hidden somewhere in the town. No, what else I was just gonna say is, shit. You were saying, oh, so how is Charlie like qualified to run a factory?
Oh, he's not. And that's the other thing. That's the thing that's creepy is he says, he's like, I decided years ago, I wanted to find a child to run this, to take my business. I couldn't choose an adult because they'd want to do it their way.
Are you saying that Willy Wonka was grooming Charlie?
He was grooming him. He was absolutely grooming him.
So he
Yes.
really is Elon Musk.
It's a canon event. It's stuff in the book too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
he's specifically that he's like grooming a child for this?
Yeah. And he's like, well, your parents can like do like the business part or whatever until you're old enough to take over.
Yeah.
That's so fucking creepy. It's really
Yeah.
creepy.
It's
And they also
weird,
go on
right?
this like elevator where she has no control over. It's like that was like the Tesla at the end, right? Like they're like, press a button, we might explode.
And they break through the glass ceiling on their way up out of the factory. Finally, the kid.
It would have made a lot more sense if the kid was a girl to break the glass ceiling. It would have been a more liberal take. I don't know.
That would have been meta.
Little
Damn.
little baby Hillary breaking into the glass ceiling.
Oh my fucking god.
Oh my god.
How does he land
Gaslight
that thing?
gatekeep girl boss.
The literally the last
Wingman,
note,
baby.
the last note that I wrote in my notes, I guess it was right after the thing, like he's bequeathing this factory to him, like in a giant glass elevator. He's like, I see my house. I just wrote like, this guy is just a weird fucker. He's just a weird dude who brought a bunch of kids that he now personally selected these kids. That's why that's it. He chose the girl who had the record for gum, right? To go to the gum room. He chose the girl who likes treats and gold and things to go to the goose room. It would have been better if Augustus had like eaten like a chocolate cow or something. That would have been more on the nose. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mike TV, obviously the TV thing.
Yeah. Also, was that like did he just like invent Amazon in that scene?
He invented teleportation.
Even in one day.
That's a really good argument for Mike TV being on the spectrum because he's the only one. He's like, you know what you did? You invented teleportation. Like you.
Also, Willy Wonka is an asshole to him the whole time. He's like, stop mumbling.
Yeah,
He is
he's
really
so
rude to him.
mean to him. And I never understood why. Like he's not really doing anything. He's not just being a kid and like going through a factory. Like of course they're gonna be loud or silly. They're children.
You want to like wear a suit and tie and like walk through here all proper or something? Like it's a chocolate factory. Like it's in the name. And the other thing, isn't the new movie called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Is that right? Or no, the book is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
The book is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and then the one with Timothy Chalamet or whatever is called Wonka.
Oh, it's called Wonka.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to discuss. I don't feel like I want to see that movie, but I'm also very curious.
Yeah.
Just because Hugh Grant is
it's like a train wreck. You have to watch it, just to see how bad it is.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, how because it's a prequel, so they can do whatever they want to it.
Oh man, is it going to show him getting the Oompa Loompa? It's not going to be.
Well, there's the trailer with Hugh Grant is playing the Oompa Loompa.
What?
Yeah. Hugh Grant.
Apparently I know nothing about this movie except that Timothy Chalamet is in it. And he's dressed like I saw a TikTok the other day and he's dressed exactly like Grover in the Muppet Christmas Carol.
That's very specific.
So specific what I saw, and I was like, "Holy shit, you're right!" I watch that movie like every year. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So Hugh Grant is.
I don't know who else is in it, but it's also like very clear in that trailer that all the other chocolate makers are like worried about this like rich kid who has a bunch of money that's going to come in and steal their, he's the competition that they don't want, but like, why? He's just a random, I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't appeal to me. Like I'm like also weird about like remakes and things. I'm like, I don't want to see the remake unless if my kids wanted to see it, I'll see it. I'm not going to.
I want to see the Oompa Loompas like burn the factory down.
I want them to form a union.
Yeah.
Yes.
the
I
Oompa
want to see
Loompa
them put
Union.
Wonka through all the tests and have weird shit happen to him.
Yeah, make him drink a bunch of that soda, like sneak it in his regular like water, and then he'll like fly up and get. Also, why did they have like a blade at the top of that room? It was in a room where you would float, and they had like a chopping device at the top of the ceiling.
Yeah, like a big fan. Like, is it supposed to pull up the bubbles? Because why would they need that when they just go up anyway? I'm not sure the physics of it, but yeah, it seems very like because if that was the case, like Charlie would have gotten the most harsh punishment out of all of them because he would have been chopped to bits. Him and his grandpa.
Yeah, there was no like putting him back together except like on the TV. Like it
Nobody would
was
have been around to hear the song. It would have
it would have just been like it would have just been like organs playing for his funeral.
been the one thing. Oh, the other thing about Grandpa Joe that I thought was pretty based is at the beginning when Charlie brings home the loaf of bread, and after he says he's tired of the cabbage water, his mom's like, "Where'd you get that?" And Grandpa Joe's like, "Who cares where he got it? He got it." I'm like, well, at least if nothing else, he doesn't give a shit if you steal food, which is the correct opinion. So thank you, Grandpa Joe.
Yeah, they should have stole more chocolate from. Well, I guess if you stole chocolate, it'd be from that little. You know what I also wonder is if that little chocolate store was actually owned by Wonka. Like, what if he actually owned all the chocolate stores and he just employs some dude to work there?
Yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I got nothing else. I'm grasping. I don't know. Do you either have any last Wonka?
Is
Oh,
this a movie that you'd recommend
I
to anyone, or under what circumstances?
I think it's a good movie that you should watch with your kids while telling them that Willy Wonka is bad.
Mhm.
So I feel like yeah, you can watch this with your kids or just as an adult. As an adult, I feel like it's more obvious the themes, but as a kid, you're not going to get those things. So watch this, like if you're watching like Robots or Bugs Life or those movies with your kids, you can tell them this movie is. My kids know that Amazon and Jeff Bezos are like as a bad person. They're like, oh, Jeff Bezos owns too much stuff. I'm like, yes, he does. And like, I feel like that could be applied to media and especially this movie, where you could say that Willy Wonka is not a good person. He injures children that he personally selected to bring there. Like it's, some kind of twisted game. So
Yeah. I would I feel like maybe we might have watched it when he was younger. When I tried to put it on the other day to watch it, because this is one of the rare instances where we're doing a movie where like I can put it on during the day or like when he's home. And he just had no interest. But I feel like if he's older and we watch it at some point, I'm gonna make it pretty clear to him that this whole thing is just one weird rich guy who employs slave labor,
yeah,
finding a kid to groom to be his successor in order to endear himself to the working class while leaving them to rot. Because he just he pushes the fantasy that you can, even though you're being exploited and life is horribly unfair because of the system into which you were born, some really nice rich guy might come along and just pluck you out of that if you're good and decent and hardworking and don't complain too much.
we need like a Wikipedia for movies and media and content where it's like leftist. And it could just be like the description of the movies, like you just described. Like that's the Wikipedia article, like the description. Socialpedia, no, Redpedia. I don't know. No, what do you? This is a question I've never asked at the end of a movie podcast, but you just said is like, oh, would you recommend this movie? Like that is, I should be saying that.
I like that.
Just thought about it.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Straight off the top
No,
of my
because
dome.
sometimes I'm thinking about that at the end, like, oh, like you should go see this movie, but like asking everyone makes perfect sense because it's after you discussed it too is like the right time.
Yeah.
What about you then? What do you say, Rye?
I think I only really want to show it to like children or like just adolescents once they're at an age where they can understand like US history, and I can connect it back to like company towns and use it as like a light example of what could happen, and like maybe show why unionizing is good, and perhaps use it as a segue to talk about colonialism
Mm.
and what happened and like IRL with cash crops like sugar and like cocoa and rice, like historically.
Yeah.
I think it could be used to have those big conversations or like just talking in the car or whatever.
Yeah, because it's like a relatable story. It's it's quirky. It's kids seem to like it. I think that's a good. My kids have actually seen it with their grandparents, but my daughter said she's like, "Oh, you watch it?" Because I was watching it the other night, and she's like, "Oh, the TV like this movie's kind of grainy, and I can't really watch it because it's like it came
I
out
think it
before like
provides like also like good examples of what like petty bourgeoisie and like working
Mhm.
class and working poor people
yeah, there is we
exist.
like didn't I mean we
Yeah.
kind of talked about like the class aspect to it, but like it's pretty well split up. Like you have the kids in the classroom, you have Charlie in the bottom, and you have like the factory owners, and then Wonka at the top.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was thinking.
No,
It's
no,
like I got to get that out before you you turn it off.
no, I like that.
I think talking about like this specific kind of thing at the end here is important, especially for the people that are always showing up in your comments, Evan, saying that it's not that deep, it's just a movie, it's whatever. Because even if the intent of whoever makes the movie isn't to provide a framework for these kinds of conversations, it's very much into the interpretation of the viewer. And if it opens up the door for conversation about these concepts, then why
Well,
the hell not?
well,
Like,
I mean, also, I feel like part of the even if who's the director of this movie? I forget. Mel Stewart. Even if Mel Stewart didn't have all of these ideas fleshed out of class and things, some of those things just come into play with just the the product of when he was making the movie, what
yeah,
his surroundings were like, because I just did an episode or recorded on Night of the Living Dead. Like that movie was filmed in 1968, like right after a lot of the riots across the country. Like even if he didn't mean those things, those are injected into a movie or a book
yeah,
or a song or whatever unintentionally. And like the whole point of this is to make big stretches, but also like the ones that I feel like are just plain to see.
yeah,
And you're right. I mean, someone will say like, "Oh, Willy Wonka's just a kids movie." It's like, well, you can feel that way, but I think part of the whole point of this too is just to media literacy. I say this a lot. Like media literacy is really horrible, especially like amongst kids. So I think you're saying, Rive, like using the media or a movie that's interesting as like a tool to explain actual events is smart.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, we've been discussing Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory coming to a company town, coming to a something near you.
Mm.
But yeah, you can listen to Rye, your podcast again for anyone literary. I just said it wrong.
It's Literary Liberation podcast on Apple Pods and Spotify and I think YouTube
Yeah,
when it wants to work.
I think I tagged your YouTube channel in this in the YouTube video for this too, so they can find it if you're watching it on YouTube. And Smirk, people can find you also on the internet.
Yeah, TikTok and yeah, let's just say TikTok.
Yeah, that's fair. And you can listen to this podcast, Left of the Projector, on Spotify, Apple, uh, Google. I don't know. I was actually looking at Audible today, and you can actually get podcasts on there, which I didn't even
Yeah,
know.
apparently that's a thing.
I didn't know that people listen to it on there. I mean, I guess it makes sense. And it said like new episode. I'm like, I don't remember seeing it was now actually my kids know I have a podcast, but they saw it on there because they go on use Audible to read like Roald Dahl books. Unfortunately, I'll cut that out so no one knows that they're reading this racist dude. A lot of old books are problematic. Anyway, I'm rambling at the end here, but thank you both for coming on. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks. Always a pleasure.
And we will